something, and I was like, that's interesting. It's not an acronym; it's just for emphasis, like
I actually have an
real.
acronym for it. I actually have one.
Really?
I'm
I
telling you.
like. Tell me.
I'm telling you.
Share.
So you see, for
Share,
me,
share,
real, where
share.
R becomes the learning, the kind of learning that the children get in your institution must be relevant. E, it must be engaging. A, you must give the children agency, and L, lifelong learning. So when you say it is,
Wow. You are
I'm
such
on
the
fire.
intellectual. You are always on fire with that beautiful
Yeah,
brain of yours. That is
yeah.
so wonderful.
So
I mean, look at that.
relevance, engagement,
Yes, I'm going to write
agency,
that down.
lifelong learning. It
Relevant.
just feeds into it.
Yeah. So relevance, what's the E for?
Relevance,
Engaging.
engaging, agency, and lifelong
Yeah.
learning.
Wow. Amazing. I'm going to steal it.
Free to steal. You know,
Our
I was
baby
just
now.
in thinking through and preparing for Saturday. I just
Uh-huh.
thought that real life learning, I mean, how can I give this thing a kick and a good sound
Yeah.
to it? And it just feeds into
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It has to be relevant. So if you're teaching children
Yeah.
and you're not bringing in real life scenarios, case studies,
Yeah.
ensuring that the things that they're learning are relevant out there, you're just wasting your time. You've just gathered them
Yeah.
for sweets and lollipop and popcorn, really,
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
That is that is amazing, Mrs. O. That is really amazing. Thank you so much for always taking
Yo,
it deeper.
if it's
Let's
not deep,
go
what are we
deeper.
doing?
That's
I
Mrs.
now
O.
make you go back to think.
Yes, I love it because it really encapsulates a lot of what we're talking about.
Yeah,
This year, we're focusing really on curriculum, and you and I have been discussing this like since last year,
last
mulling
year,
over it.
yes,
Yes, thinking about it, making sure, praying about it, if we can go ahead and share that. So
yes,
I'm really
yeah,
excited. But we know that real student success, capital
mm,
REAL,
L,
fully caps, it is so multifaceted. It's such a
yeah,
dynamic, versatile, multidimensional thing. That's why we said, you know what, we would love to do like a multi-day conference. But we know
mm,
educators are always, and parents, students, everybody is engaged in school activities. So it's difficult to pull out, during the holidays, they need that rest, they need time to prep for the new term,
mm,
new year. So that's why we decided to do these live sessions to really
mm,
carry the conversation as far as we need more days.
yeah,
But thankfully, we're doing 4 so we can really dive into this. So that's 4 hours of diving into what real student success really looks like, plus D-Day on the 19th this Saturday for us to really go even further. And then we hope that the takeaways will lead or trigger conversations that will go further still. So for this particular day 1 live, we're focusing on community engagement for future readiness. And for us, after COVID, future readiness is always going to be like goal number 1. Meaning not just future readiness in terms of making it look good, making it look techy, making it look futuristic, right? But future ready in terms of they're not going to find themselves scrambling in the future because we're preparing them to make sure that when the time comes, they are ready to go. So how do we do that? It's almost like fast forwarding, having premonition, almost prophesying into the future. How do we, prepare them to be ready for that future, which we don't even know fully, which we don't
mm,
fully grasp, given the
mm,
versatile nature of the world, and it's just moving at breakneck speed. How do we prepare them for that? And we spent a lot of time thinking about this. And the first topic today, community engagement. For many people, they're probably like, what? Community engagement? What does that even have to do with success, right?
Mm.
What does community engagement have to do with real success? So, Mrs. O, what does community engagement, what does it have to do with real student success in your perspective, from your perspective?
Hmm. Uh, Victoria, yeah, I mean, I hope you're ready for a great story. You
Oh,
see, when
yes,
people
I
hear
am.
community engagement, they think community service, they think, I'm a storyteller, so I have to give you some gist. They
Please
think
do.
going to the orphanage and dropping 2 cartons of
Yes.
instant noodles. That's not what we're talking about. We are talking about an institution understanding and acknowledging that the community is part of its stakeholders. And if, as an institution, you actually acknowledge that the community is part of your stakeholders, how are you engaging and managing them? I'll give you a typical example. Safe Hand Schools. I mean, in the course of my 6 years being there, one of the things that we established was corporate social responsibility. Because if you look at your institution as a business concern, what are you doing to give back to the society? Now, it's very easy for us to think that as a school, you can look at your bottom line to say, profit after tax is X million or whatever. I want to give a percentage of it. It's easy, but you need to get your students involved because the students will become the workforce of the next few years. How are you teaching them to have a business that empathizes with society? So one of the things I did you see, you can have that as a standalone, but I needed it to be a non-core aspect of what I'm teaching in the school. So every year I start to look at what the World Economic Forum is saying about skills of the future of work. And I decided to do some form of reverse engineering to bring that in. I'm sure you're wondering, what does this got? Hold on, I'm going somewhere. The very first year, I
No, no,
stumbled
no.
on the very first year, I stumbled on information about empathy, and I saw that they said Google recruiters were looking out for employees, people that they were going to employ that were had empathy, and I found that very interesting. That fantastic CV, fantastic, what will I call it now? Job or work experience, but you're still telling me you want people working with you that have empathy. So I said to myself, brilliant, Mrs. O, because look, a society you don't have empathy for, you can't give to. You are not feeling. Do you understand? There's a level of emotions this thing must bring up that you're willing to give to them. So that year, I remember saying to my pupils that, look, let's go to an underserved community in Abuja. And we were not just going to do that as in just pick a school. You will do a proper needs assessment, because what I was thinking is that 10 years, 15 years down the line, you're either working in a company or you own yours. You know the things to put in place and treat this thing as a project. So do your needs assessment so that, like I said, just don't go to an orphanage and give Indomie noodles. It is not that giving those things to an orphanage or visiting an orphanage is bad. It is to tell the students that you give people what they need, what not what you think they want, actually what they need. And so after we did all of those things, they came up with a fantastic budget. But I said to them, you are not going to have entitlement to the money in your parents' pocket, because people want to hear you. If you walk up to me to say, Mrs. Oh, I'm trying to raise 50,000 naira, but I have raised 20. Can you please give us the remaining 30 or a percentage of it? I'm bound to listen to you as against you bringing your entire 50,000 to me. I don't want children that feel they're entitled to the money in my pocket. So
Yeah.
they did that. And then part of the things they did was fundraising initiatives, just not look at the money that you want to raise and go and meet mom and dad. But you see, this is how you would know. For me, I put in KPIs to ensure that how would I know that they've met that target of empathy? When they went on TV and they were doing some form of awareness for their project, one the chairman for the fundraising project, and the name sounds very elegant, but it was just one of the year six boys, said to the presenter that the difference between that one asked the presenter asked and said, Lorenzo, what's the key learning you're taking away from this experience? And he said the only difference between me and that child at that school is the opportunity that life has given to me. Trust me, Victoria, if we were
Yeah.
not even raising any money after that, that is done. So where I'm
Yeah.
going to is, as an institution, ensure that CSR becomes a major component or a target of what you're doing as a school. Ensure that you have the entire your entire ecosystem, your students, your parents, your teachers involved in it, and put systems in place to ensure that you've met it. So for me, empathy means every child in that place understanding that there's no difference between you as a pupil at Safe Hands and a pupil at that school. And so that was it for me. I hope I've answered your question and I've not gone the route of storytelling.
No, you have answered my question beautifully. Before I move on, let me welcome the amazing Dr. Abimbola Ogundere.
Good evening, everyone. Good
Good
evening,
evening.
Victoria. Good evening, Tosin. Sincere apologies. I don't know why I just thought it was 6 p.m. So I was there, but Tosin, you were chatting with
I'm
me now.
sorry. I'm sorry. You know, we were chatting before then.
Can you imagine?
I just was
I'm
chatting, we were chatting. I'm like, you know. So
where
when you
is
say where
she?
am I, I'm thinking, where am I about, But I mean, apologies, but I'm
I'm
glad to be here.
sorry.
Was here early as usual.
As I finished with her, I just saw your message and I just logged on. So I just thought that, apologies, doc. You
Yes,
know
no,
me.
it's
I've
fine,
got
it's
love
fine.
for you.
No, so I mean, it's one of those things. I'm
It's
just
great.
used to the 6 p.m., 7 p.m., but good to be here. Thank you so much, Victoria, for having me. And I'm so
Oh,
excited about the symposium coming up, 5.0. Well done. 5.0 means you must have done 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. So 5.0 or 5.0, well done. I think that's the first thing.
very
Like I
good.
always say, it's very important that every one of us, in our little ways, in our little corner, we are, you know, service learning, just giving back, almost like part
Yeah.
of our civic responsibility, to go
Yes.
beyond our space and then give more people the opportunity
Yeah.
to become a better version of themselves, right? So I think that's
Yeah.
what we're all trying to do. So well done there. And I caught,
Thank
I think most of what Tosi was saying, and she's very passionate about this. You can let
Yeah.
just Tosi talk about this from now till so it's good to be here. Good to be here.
It's
Thank you for having
fantastic
me.
to have you, Dr. Ogundere. It's safe to say that you're education royalty. So we're very happy to have you virtually in the Abuja education space, obviously.
I love it.
So,
Mm,
Tosin was just talking about, empathy, and
mm,
what really struck me, yes, creating empathy is important. And tomorrow
mm,
we're having a discussion about social emotional learning, but that's a great
mm,
connection.
mm,
Creating empathy is in itself important currency.
mm,
She also mentioned that, focusing on CSR, but when schools think about CSR, they think, okay, well, that means we'll just go and give, something to the
mm,
orphanage, or give
mm,
Indomie, give, take
mm,
pictures with the
mm,
orphans, and
mm,
done, take, dusted
mm,
for the year.
mm, mm,
But we're rethinking what that could
mm,
look like. And one of the key
mm,
things that I took away from her response was, you don't just go out and say
mm,
you want to
mm,
give. You have to do a
mm,
needs assessment first to
mm,
understand what the needs are. Because when you think
mm,
about it, it's really quite condescending to assume, right?
mm,
Number one. Number two, beyond being condescending, it takes away the opportunity to fully engage with the community, to understand what the
mm,
needs are. That
mm,
requires not just empathy, yes, but it
mm,
also requires a level of
mm,
vulnerability, being able
mm,
to open yourself to having
mm,
conversations with the community. It
mm,
becomes a two-way interaction, not just we're just
mm,
giving.
mm,
But you're also collecting feedback, you're
mm,
also listening, you're also showing concern. And then
mm,
you respond to their needs based on that. And that's
mm,
all really service learning. But
mm,
in what concrete skills do you think students
mm,
can gain from
mm.
active participation in community-based projects. Because that's what a lot of people are going to be thinking, okay, yeah, so they will learn to care about the community. Yes, they will get to know that, they're not, all fingers are not equal. But are there concrete skills that students can take away from this that could actually tie back to that performance in the future job market?
Okay. All right. Good question. Thank you so much for that. In our school, in the college, the college is 3 years old. So I think from year 2, we started the service learning, right? And what we did with that was to say, okay, you know what? In groups, so the year 7, that's JSS1, you know how these things can be. Year 7 and year 8 and then year 9. So that was last year. So no, year 9 and year 10. So we said to them, get together, right? And then brainstorm, do some research with regards to, what is service learning, right? What sort of, I'm looking for the word, what sort of areas, right? Broad areas, right? Do you think that you can, render this service, connect with, and then do a bit of, give back, right? So they did that. And when they did that, they were tasked to present their options, right? So the presentation of options, obviously, using technology, in whatever format that they wanted to use that. So they did that. They presented it to the board of people, which would obviously communication, public speaking, that confidence in standing in front of people and speaking to them because you want to get some kind of response. You're trying to convince them, as it were. So they did that, and then we said, okay, you want to work with the first year. So I'm using last year. This year was quite more elaborate, but let me just use last year. So they said, oh, we want to visit schools, underserved schools, right? We want to even see what those sort of things look like. So he said, that's fine. So now do more research where underserved schools in Lagos area. So we are in the Ikeja. So somewhere that is not too far because you cannot travel for 4 hours to go and visit a school for 1 hour. So they did that. So all the skills are coming out. So there's research, there's using technology for presentation, there's communication, presentation, negotiation, almost trying to convince people, right? Almost like what you see in those Shark Tanks and the rest. And then they did that, okay, let's do some research. And then they said, okay, we're going to go to Makoko, right? Now you're going to go to Makoko. So you go to Makoko. So the first thing that we do, like you've mentioned, is that they go there and visit the school. So they spend a day in the school, just being with the students, doing nothing. So just observing, being with them, asking them questions. So in preparation for that, they wrote a letter, right? And then the teacher went with them. Of course, this is where you can't send them alone. So the teacher went with representatives from year 7 and 8 to the head teacher there, presented it. And so we've never heard of the school, right? They just did their research. So they wrote that letter. What do you want to come and do? Why do you want to come and do it? What is everybody going to gain? What are you going to gain? What are the children? What's the school going to gain? And they did that, and they, so of course, letter writing, or proposal, which is very fundamental, right? So they did all that. Then you are going there. How are you going to get your information? The information that you need. So do you want to use a questionnaire? Do you want to do a focus group? And they did all this. So they created a questionnaire, right? They did a focus group with the teachers and then with the children as well. Right? What would you like to have? What do you think you don't have? So they did all that. And so of course in all that there's always taking more communication, more critical thinking, right? In the space of that. And of course just creating all that information. And then they went for another day. Now many of them went the next day, and they had to do, they put themselves in groups, they had to work in teams, So this is the team that's going to be in primary one. This is the team that's going to be in primary, and they had, and then last year wearing so many. So the college is a new school, right? So I think year 7 and 8 were probably about 40 something, So they did that observation. So the plan was they did spend the whole day, come back, then sit down, and you cannot give them everything they need. So what do you think they need that is very important to them? What is their... So they had to decide on that. So that's where you now saw a bit of argument. That negotiation. Some people thought they needed, some people thought, so our own children, they're having interactive whiteboard, laptops for all, tablets for all, feeling like, so already, we're going to do it, we're going to change their lives. So that, but what we now did was, for those conversations, we put a teacher. But with children as well, you don't want the conversation to start and never end. So who just moderated, and also so that was, I liked that. I think that was one of my favorite. How do you convince people to do what you think? So you have to have your data and all the information. So when they decided on what to do, then they had to go raise funds. So I remember, I heard Tosin saying it. So it wasn't as if go to your family and go and get all the money, because many of the children will be from work. So we don't want that. We sent a letter to the parents. We want them to expose them to your cousin, to your neighbors, to whatever. And we don't want any money coming from any family. You know what I mean? So that they are able to sell what they saw. They are able to, so now they've seen it. So there was some people came back crying. Some people, there was a lot of emotion. So that emotion, go and use it to collect money from somebody else. Right? So they did that. So we gave them. So what we do is our service planning week is week 2 of the term, and our service planning service planning week. The service execution week is the week after midterm. So they have about 4 or 5 weeks in the middle to just get their stuff ready. We usually do this in the first term. So they raised funds. I think they raised maybe above 2-point-something million. Right? So now they then went to the market themselves. So again, another group went to the market. So they are said, okay, they want to give them whiteboards, not necessarily interactive boards. So at least whiteboard, exercise, some exercise book market. So just had that list for them. So they went to the market themselves, negotiated themselves. So we had negotiated the pricing, we must come back with something that makes sense, blah, blah, blah. So they did that, they came back, and then of course it was now the day to present. Right? So you're going to do t-shirts. So so they are going with uniform, but now is a great day. So you have arts and crafts, design your t-shirt, right? And the best design gets to be on the t-shirt. So everybody back. And they will now do by, on t-shirt, write by this person, this person, this person. So, students need motivation. Everybody going out, being excited. So they got that, they did, they printed that out. They went, and of course, we had outlined other things that will happen. So you teach. So what topic do you want to teach? So it's not just go and give them. So you're still spending another day, you teach topics. And another thing that they wanted to, they tried to do was, to go with already designed, so if you come to our school, all our display boards are quite, done and all that. So they thought, why that they don't even have display boards? They thought, okay, you know what? When you are going, create posters and things like that. So it was quite, extensive. It was quite interesting. And I think they spent the day there. So when they came back, what I liked was we asked them to do a report on the whole experience. What did you learn? How has it impacted you? What are you going to do more? What do you know? Who do you think needs to solve this problem? Right? And so that took them a bit into their social studies, their geography, and all those things. Like when you talk about slums in geography, and so they were able to relate and they presented it. So multiple skills across.
So absolutely, I love how you just unpacked that, because one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the, you know, the school teachers, basically all they see is red light, just stress, 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 and the million and one different reasons for why it's not doable and why it's not away from the curriculum. And my pet peeve, my number one pet peeve, which always comes up, is how is this going to help them for external exam? Well, I love how, first of all, both yourself and Mrs. O are talking from two different perspectives, two different approaches. One from a senior primary perspective, the other from a junior secondary perspective. But you know the commonality in both what you discuss is that it is project-based learning. We can go around and say, oh, we want to do project-based learning, we want to do project-based learning. But this is a concrete way to teach these college readiness skills. So beyond just the, you know, the integration of English, language arts, in terms of research, in terms of writing the reports, the IT integration, in terms of publishing that reports, you know, sharing it with parents, even the numeracy skills, the math skills, in terms of prioritizing, doing the numbers, crunching the numbers to see how they can afford it, prioritizing, you know,
Budgeting.
budgeting. I mean, the integration skills are endless. And this is what, you know, curriculums like the International Baccalaureate really celebrate. Opportunities for multidimensional cross-curricular learning opportunities, because these learning opportunities actually last in, you know, a life, make for lifelong learning, essentially.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But most importantly, I asked the question, what are the concrete skills? These are concrete college-ready skills. Your
Absolutely.
children are definitely not going to be asking you, sir, ma, how does this have to do with my real life? So I love the fact that it makes them work on collaboration. It draws teachers also to work into collaboration. So in all those things about statistics that I've been trying to teach, perfect example to look at it. Like you mentioned, all those things about geography, this is how to bring it to life. There's so much you can do with this. Age is not a barrier for the children. Mr. Daniel was here. Mr. Daniel, are you still with us? We lost him. I think he's commuting. I wanted to.
Victoria, is there a link for people to join, or is this live on YouTube or Instagram?
This is live on YouTube and live on Instagram. I'm believing it. My first time.
Worst
My
case
first
scenario,
time
we can
using
share the
StreamYard.
recording.
Yeah, we will find out soon enough. Mr. Daniel, are you with us? Can you join us now? Can you unmute and just let us know if you're able to speak?
Yeah, I'm still in transit, but yeah, I can speak.
Yes, I saw that. Welcome on board, Mr. Daniel. It's fantastic to have you. Real life happens, so we love that you are in transit. Yes, it might affect your internet, but this is the reality, and a lot of our listeners will also be in transit. So you're totally fine. We're so happy to have you. I don't know how much of the conversation you were able to catch, Mr. Daniel. Do you want to chip in? Because I have a question for you that's related to Dr. Abimbola's response. Shall I carry on with the question?
Yes, go on. I'd see how it is. Yes, go on with the question.
Okay, because I know you totally love projects. Part of what you do is at Starbright Schools is that you're constantly looking for community engagement projects, especially as related to the SDGs. So I was wondering if you wanted to shed any light on how service learning, CSR, community engagement can actually develop concrete skills in students. And Dr. Abimbola spoke extensively about that. But I know you're also really passionate about mentoring. So, do you see opportunities for mentoring to be developed by community engagement? Can you explain?
Okay, if I got you correctly, you wanted me to shed light on some sort of community engagement at Startright Schools, yeah? Because I kind of
Not
lost you
a,
for a bit.
That's okay. I was talking about the role that mentorship has in community engagement and how that can impact students for their future career paths.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'll give you this one example. There was a time when we had students raise funds. So we set up this Interact Club, right? And then the students decided to do some sort of big sale. Yeah.
Okay.
The funds that they gathered was used to organize a kind of program for an orphanage. So they had set up a program where they would train these orphans on tie and dye, um, bead making, creative writing, and then crocheting. So we visited this orphanage school. This was after they had raised these funds. Of course, you know the process of raising funds, writing letters to the school management, getting sent back to go and correct stuff, getting them getting pissed off. Why can't you just accept this one proposal at once? And then they are going back and forth trying to meet up with the criteria, for getting approval. So that was one stage. They weren't going to get
Yep.
a yes at once. They were going to go back and do that much work in terms of, dotting all the I's,
Yeah.
crossing the T's and stuff. Now, when they crossed that stage, big sale actually. Hello, can you still hear me?
Yes, 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 we can hear you.
Awesome, awesome. They had to execute, as planned. The guideline for executing was very simple. This is what you have as a blueprint. Do not do anything that we have not discussed, right? So in their minds, they had to follow some sort of rule. Otherwise, they would account for maybe some loss or some damage or whatever. So we were monitoring, to see how they paid attention to what they were being told to do. And then we're
What age?
also looking for initiatives, something they could do outside of, the box, or sort of. You were asking a question?
Yeah, what age were these children?
These were 13, 14, 12,
Okay.
13, 14,
Okay, so
right?
junior secondary. Okay.
Yeah, juniors and a few senior school. They had some of the year 12s as their major guide. So we had mentors among them, right? Among the
Okay.
students themselves, right? And then when we got to the point of executing the project, we had to do a risk assessment, which was done by an in-house staff. But when we got to the orphanage, it was all student-led, from engaging with the administrator at the orphanage home to engaging with the kids to ensuring that everyone was split into groups, and then getting who starts what. Everything was just well coordinated. So I think that in line with the conversation, the kids have to, deep dive into the whole idea of critical thinking and collaboration and trying to solve a problem, because they saw
Yeah.
that
Project based.
even though they were kind of comfortable at their end, they could clearly see that there were kids that needed help, and we could see how that after that whole experience, what they wanted to do was to raise more funds to do more for those kids, right? So I think that all this conversation that we're having um, would be more beneficial when we are deliberate about putting the kids. You recall that conversation we were having during the last training at Clifton, where the
Yeah,
lady who spoke in the video was saying, put them in situations where they have to face problems, right?
struggle. Yeah, where they can struggle.
A
Yeah.
child will never be able to think if we're always positioning to quickly solve the problem for them. They would not, work their brains out to get out of that problem. And the truth of the matter is, they have the capacity to do that. But the human nature naturally just wants things easy. And so every time we make things too easy, they will get used to things being easy. And when
Yeah.
the real life hits, when real life hits and things are not easy, you begin to find someone talk about mental health and depression and stuff like that, because there's been
Interesting.
no training, because there's been
Interestingly,
no training over time, you
sorry to
know.
cut you, Mr. Daniel. Interestingly enough, that's our topic for tomorrow. And Mrs. O, I
Oh,
think,
nice.
also brought it up because with community engagement, with engaging with the community in real meaningful ways through service learning, through project, based and extended projects as well as short projects, multidisciplinary integrations.
Mm-hmm.
They are not only picking up concrete skills, but they're also, learning to have empathy. One of the things that I think really caused me to think about, this being really tied to real success is the fact that when you look at our society, you see a lot of disconnect, right? Whether you're talking about students who've gone to Nigerian university, we are now talking really to a large extent in the private sector. And we have to be fair, the schools that we cater to are middle upper class schools, right? So to be fair, these children, many of them will either study in private universities here in Nigeria, to be fair, or they will go to some of Nigeria's best public universities. A good number of them will go abroad. Many of them will still filter back to Nigeria at the end of the day, whether they have, Japan,
Japa and Jakbada.
yes. So the bottom line is they will have to integrate for the most of them into Nigerian society. And what you see, even in our society now, is that there's a complete disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
We view middle class, middle upper class, even lower middle class, view them. There's a them and us kind of factor. And you can't serve a community that you don't have empathy for. You can't serve a community you haven't engaged
Can't
with,
engage with,
right?
yeah.
Mrs. O talked about understanding the needs of the community. You can't even see yourself as part of the community and your role in changing that society if you're disconnected from it. So when we we don't want to do field trips, we have to think about security, safety. What we're basically doing is creating an echo chamber, creating a bubble that our children will live in, and they will never be able to see what role they have in changing Nigeria. The only role that they might see in changing Nigeria is I want to be the president of Nigeria, I want to be a senator, I want to be a minister, with no real understanding about how to actually engage the community and the needs of the community, and no empathy for it for sure. So I think that disconnect is something that is really important because we keep talking about politicians and how we have the problem of Nigeria is corruption. But my question is, who are the leaders? Where are the leaders? It's our children. Where are the leaders? This is what I see
My
on
hand
that.
is up. My hand is up.
Please
Because I'll be
go for
shaking
it.
my
Go
head,
for it.
sis.
Go for
You
it.
you know, you were saying this thing. We had a really horrible experience with the very first underserved school that we wanted to work with. In fact, we started working with them. Immediately, the head of school, and it's a public school, heard the amount that my students raised. They immediately flipped and said we should build them an admin block.
Wow. See,
Yes.
those are the real
That was a
challenges.
very, very
Yeah.
traumatizing experience for
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
pupils. But you see, we pulled the brakes on that project. I went back to the funders to say, this is it, that can they please give us some time to think through
Yeah.
this. But we came back because guess what? It is the children in that school. They had over 300 children and they had just 3 classrooms. You know, it's the
And they
children
wanted
in that
admin
school,
block.
and they wanted an admin block. Yes. In fact, the day, like I said, we ensured that our children were not working to a script. So they didn't feel entitled to anyone's money. So big sales, they wrote a devotional, they adopted it into a play. It was a ticketed event. So they wanted to raise 1 point something. They raised about 200% more than what they had budgeted. And so we invited that school for the event, and they thought we were going to hand them over that money. And I said, no, we have accountability and there's transparency, and we're
Yeah.
teaching our children to go the entire length and
Governance.
breadth of this project so they will see
Yeah.
it to completion. If we told the
Yes.
funders that we were providing desks and everything, and we came to your school to find out the needs, that is what
Yeah.
we are going to do. So we
Yeah.
eventually did that, but then I just blocked the head of school from my phone. I'm sorry, I don't have anything to say to them, and it's
Yeah.
very sad because
Yeah.
in that school we have children with very bright futures, but with very horrible people leading the institution.
Wow.
How do you want to
Wow.
come back from that?
Yes. That's amazing. I'm glad you shared that. Yes, Dr. Abimbola, what other challenges have you
Okay,
experienced?
no, so I don't know. I'm trying to, because how are people supposed to join this conversation? Because I've tried to join it everywhere, Instagram, YouTube. It says live streaming,
It's
but
not
live
showing
streaming
anywhere. I've
where?
just refused to bet. I've seen messages coming up that
Because people
it's
are
not
saying I want to
live.
join. So it's something to think about when you are done, Victoria. Just something to think
Thank you
about, right?
so
When
much.
you are
Thank you
done,
so
yes.
much. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
okay, so I think that the issues that the issues that people bring up, they are real. So I'll give you an example. So I mean, we cannot really say that every area, even in Lagos State, is safe. Sort of for me to carry 40 of other people's children and say we are going to go and look for something. So I think that we must consider those factors as well, right?
Absolutely.
And they don't necessarily need to stop us, but they must be considered, right? So
Of
that we
course.
don't get into any kind of trouble, or so maybe you want to do the same thing, maybe you don't need to go to the most unsafe area, right? Where we know that they are kidnapping children and things
Of
like that.
course. Of
But I mean, there are
course.
so many, considerations with regards to. I think the word for I like to use is the implementation. So you have a plan, and then you need
Yeah.
to implement your plan. I think that
I think
I just
somebody
wanted to say
mentioned
that.
risk assessments. I think it was Mr. Daniel who mentioned conducting a risk assessment prior.
Yes.
Exactly,
Yes.
absolutely. So it must be done, yes, so that we
Yeah.
don't,
Well,
we're not trying to compound the issues that
of
exist.
course, of course. But I love the different responses you've given. But that brings me to another really, really important perspective, which is community engagement does not necessarily have to always do with the less privileged. So I was
Yes.
reading an innovation, what's it called? Innovation Summit reports. I'll share it later. From 2023, and one of the it ranks basically countries around the world based on how innovative they are. And one of the things that was shared, one of the criteria was industry institution relationships.
Mhm.
So when you think about community engagement from that perspective, yes, there's the aspect of empathy, developing skills, but there's also the aspect of community engagement, from the perspective of uh, institutions collaborating with, industry. I think, Mrs. O, you actually tried to do something like this a couple of years at Safe Hands when you looked at the future of the work of the job market.
Oh
Do
yes,
you
that
remember?
we got heads of schools from different schools to come and talk to teachers.
Yes.
Yes, I
I
remember we
remember
did that.
speaking Yes, I
Yes.
remember speaking at that. And one of the speakers that you had was Mr. Oladipo, and he was speaking about basically the job, what skills are needed.
Yes.
I think speaking from a banking perspective,
Mm.
HR, in the financial
Mm.
sector, and we often don't have these kinds of conversations between schools and the
Yeah.
people
Like
that we
round
are
table
hoping.
conversations.
Yes, roundtable conversation. So we think that we're preparing our children for this job and that job. Whereas by the time they graduate, or even right now, our education system is, I think, many decades behind, and we're playing catch up. So one of the challenges is that by the time our students actually graduate, the skills that we taught them are no longer relevant, and not just in terms of tech, right? So, what is the industry looking for right now in the financial sector, the aviation sector? What jobs are in decline, and what opportunities are now in demand that our students need to know and prepare for? Because many times we have career counselors, which are wonderful. We have, career fairs, but oftentimes they're looking at the jobs that their parents had. They're not hearing from
Their
people in
parents
the
had, yes.
industry who are saying,
Yes.
listen, we don't need this anymore because AI
mm,
is taking
Listen.
over these kind of positions.
mm,
What we need now is for you to focus
mm,
on these kinds of jobs, or we see these kinds of jobs becoming
mm,
really, really in demand, and we need students to start prepping for that. Mr. Daniel, is this something
mm,
that you have had any encounter
mm,
with?
mm.
Your community engagement projects, have you had any industry institution relations, or is it something that you're now thinking about?
mm.
Hello, Mr. Daniel. You're
Yes, I'm
muted.
with you.
Yes.
You
So
asked a
my question,
question.
yes, my question was about industry institution relations, coming at community engagement from that perspective, in light of the future job market, the current job market, having conversations that help inform our students, help inform our heads of academics on the kinds of skills that are needed in the workplace now, or will be needed in the workplace in the next couple of years. Have you had any of those kinds of collaborations, or is that something that you're looking to explore soon?
Yeah, when we had our last TEDx event, yeah. So we deliberately invited two speakers. Now one of them came from Luxembourg. He is currently in charge of stabilizing the euro in Luxembourg, right? And he
Okay.
said so his mother, funny, his mother owns a school in Lagos. And so, yeah, his mother owns a school in Lagos. And he said the moment his mother passed, he decided he was going to close down that school, that they are teaching rubbish. In fact, his words were, we are teaching rubbish in Nigeria. He's based in Luxembourg now. So he says what he wants to do is to bring down the structure of the school and then introduce pure data science, data engineering, data architecture courses for children from the slums, right? So from his experience, if he can train a child for 3 years on data, right, which is one of the skills for the future, that child can be earning as much as $1,000 per week or per month, depending
Please
on,
wait so I can go
and
and tell
so
my daughter to work on it.
and so if he can raise just 100 children, if he can raise just 100 children, right, that is guaranteed that those 100 children can raise another 50 children, right? And so what he's trying to do is to equip them with skills that he knows will be in high demand, right, in the next couple of years. Now, we also brought in a lady called Jennifer. So Jennifer is another AI engineer. In fact, she's in charge of, when they say when you watch Netflix and it begins to suggest to you what you should watch next,
The
right?
algorithm.
Yes, the algorithm. She's one of the engineers behind, those algorithms. And she says that
Nice.
those things will be necessary in marketing,
Yes.
in job
Everywhere.
search, in everything. And so this is what kids are supposed to be learning. Now, not all
Please,
kids
I
are
have things to say.
inclined
Oh. I have really
Yes.
have things to say.
I,
okay.
Because I need to
Even
finally
Victor
look
has
for a
just
move.
come. I've been
What
waiting.
Mr. What David?
Now,
And
sorry,
there
let
are
me
some things
finish.
that are saying that
Now, not
I
all
need to.
kids.
Yes.
Sorry, but now not all kids are going to be inclined to tech,
Uh-huh.
right? Not all kids are going to be inclined to tech. So we brought in a business person, an art inclined person, a music person, right?
Mm,
Just to balance things up a bit.
mm,
Now, what we found out, what is common among these guys is you must have a growth mindset. You must have a willingness to learn. You
Exactly.
must be able to do some sort of SWOT analysis on yourself. What are your strengths, weaknesses? Know what you are passionate about and the kind of problems you want to solve. That is why today we are beginning to see those who have gone for medical studies now becoming photographers, right? And so they are not
you know what
actively
they do.
doing surgery, but they are taking pictures in a theater where surgery is happening and using it to
yeah.
tell stories about, and that person is still making money, right? So
Yeah.
there has to be a lot of conversation in fact, once the child comes to school, there's something we're trying to do now to do some sort of assessment across the board and monitor probably yearly or biannually to see what your interests are and whether they could change over time. So that by the
It's
time
very
you get into
important.
year so that by the time you get into year 10, we are telling you that based on your personality, your interest, and whatever, this is the likely place you are supposed to be, operating in. However, if you choose, if you choose to follow what your father wants you to do, it is okay, right? But when you are done with that and your calling is speaking to what your whatever your innate abilities are pulling out of you. You are free to go back to that and blend it too.
Mr.
So
Daniel, I have to stop you there because we're really, really almost running out of time. You've touched on the last symposium and what we focused on in the parenting session, which was
I
the
was
strength
literally going to say that. Where's Victoria? She frozen.
I think maybe it has
I
ended.
think the network
The
is frozen.
internet is
Was it mine?
no, it's not. It's definitely not us.
So let
I'm
me
sure
let
she'll
me
come
start to
back.
speak before she comes. I think we must be very careful about the narrative that we believe and share, right, as a country. And I think that is one of the fundamental problems that we have. And we have to also protect the image of our country. I think it's quite unfair for someone to come in and say that what they are seeing in Nigeria